Okay, I think we are ready to start today's Dhamma talk. As on the previous days, we would start by reciting Namo Tassa to pay homage to the Buddha.
Oh my goodness. We have a kid in attendance.
Pardon?
With a donut on his head.
Marlon, are you okay to start?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in that case, we are going to pay homage to the Buddha by reciting the Namo Tassa stanza 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So everyone, welcome back to Introducing Buddhism series of lecture again. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is part of the Four Noble Truths. It's the last truth, the last one, the fourth one. Usually is described by the Buddha as the way leading to the end of suffering. In simple terms, the Buddha presents the Eightfold Path as a solution to human condition that he has diagnosed with the Four Noble Truths. We have already discussed about the diagnosis of human condition. Inevitable suffering and also suffering that we can avoid, but habitually we just top it up. So if the whole Four Noble Truth is about how to manage daily problem that we face in our life, the theoretical background, then the Eightfold Path spells out clearly what are the factors that we have to put into practice. As the name goes, it's the Noble Eightfold Path. In English and in Pali, it's clear because the path that has eightfold, meaning that has 8 constituents. But in Thai and in Burmese, we stop at the Eightfold. We don't usually include the path. So, for the sake of Burmese speaking and Thai speaking people, I need to point this out. In Singapore, they just use Pali, Astangika Marka, so they use the whole phrase. So there's no problem of cutting half, Eightfold and then path. In Burmese, we usually say Megan Shippa. Translated into English, it means Eightfold. Eightfold or eight constituents. So the terminology drops like the path, the word the path. In Pali, Maggo, we just use the word Atangiko. We just translate that one. The implication is that it's the same in Thai. Before I talk about the implication. In Thai, we will say, Mak mi ong bad. Mak mi ong bad. In Thai, we use the word Mak, the path, at the beginning. At the beginning. But for some reason, people still focus on the eight constituents rather than the one path that those eight factors constitute. The implication is that when you say Meganshipa or Eightfold or eight constituents, we become distracted by individual constituent. It's true that we need to understand each and every constituent of the path, all eight of them. But when we just focus on eight factors and not the fact that eight factors form a path in the terminology, we tend to separate them and practice them separately. For example, the eight factors, as we all know, they are divided into three groups. The first one is wisdom group, which is the wisdom training. The second one is ethical training, ethics, the second group. The third one is meditation or psychological training. In many communities, people would say that ethics of morality is the foundation, so we need to focus on that first. That means, people would pay a lot of attention observing the 5 precepts, but they would postpone meditation. They would postpone doing that. And also, as a result of focusing only on the individualities of the 8 constituents, people don't link those 8 factors together. There's no attempt in integrating them. I emphasize this because when you think the moral factor, they are the foundation, and as you build a house, a building, you're trying to get the foundation done first. And then you go up like that. But if we look at the symbol of Buddhism, especially in the West, the symbol of Buddhism is the wheel with 8 factors, with 8 spokes. In many Buddhist communities in Asia, we don't really need to have or to emphasize the symbol of Buddhism because we live in the Buddhist communities. We are born and bred, okay, in the Buddhist community. Sometimes, instead of 8 spokes, people have 12 spokes, like in Thailand, for example. In the Dhammacakka flag, people have 12 spokes. And in Burma or in Myanmar, people have 24 instead of 8. So the 8 factors, if you see in the wheel, just one wheel, but 8 spokes, okay, 8 spokes. Those 8 spokes, they work together to turn the only in one wheel. They work together. Unless they work together, the wheel, okay, the turning of the wheel is not smooth. So when someone talks about ethics, put in simple practice of 5 precepts, the 5 precepts which is very common and very well known among the Buddhists, and also actually non-Buddhists know that Buddhists have 5 precepts. The non-injury of life, and not taking away, not taking, things belonging to other people, which is not given. And the third one, not to indulge in sexual misconduct. The fourth one, not to tell a lie or gossip or slander. And the last one is to refrain from intoxication. So those 5 precepts, if we take them out of the context of the Eightfold Path, we don't actually link them to the wisdom factor, we don't link them to meditation. Without meditative training or contemplative training of the mind, observing the 5 precepts is a hard task. But for people who combine some contemplative practice, calming the mind, observing emotion, the meditative factors or psychological factors, for them, observing the 5 precepts makes more sense, or is a lot easier. But to make more sense, if somebody understands the 5 precepts in the context of wisdom development, here it means why we refrain from injuring living beings, why we do that. So to know the reason, that's wisdom factor. So for those people who understand and accept the reason why we should be following these things, then for them, maintaining the 5 precepts is not a big burden anymore. So this is my introduction to the Eightfold Path. I just would like to remind you that the 8 factors, they work together. They are not a ladder, a ladder that we have to practice one after another. In the list of the 8 that you have been given, the first 2 factors, they are wisdoms. That doesn't mean that we have to have wisdom first before we go to the next 3 factors, which comprise the ethical development. To emphasize what I have just said in my introduction, the order of the 8 factors, they are not arranged in sequence of importance, because all of them are important. So, Eightfold path, just singular form in English. In Pali, Ariyo Atankiko Maggo. Maggo is also just a singular form. That is to say, one path, not 8 paths. When we say in Burmese, Mekan Ship, we actually emphasize the 8. So some people, if they don't read closely, they can take it that, there are 8 paths. Actually, it's only one path. One path that is made of 8 factors, 8 constituents. With this in mind, the second point that I'd like to make is that some people think Noble Eightfold Path is for monks like me, for monks and nuns, who have renounced a family life. I want to tell you that this is not the case. Noble Eightfold Path is for everyone who has physical or psychological suffering, who has any kind of suffering. I mentioned in my previous talk that anxiety is suffering, irritation is suffering, disappointment is suffering. The reason that we consider them as suffering is because we take life very seriously. Very serious. The Buddha takes life very seriously. It's so valuable. This valuable life, the value of this life can be dampened, can be reduced with anxiety, with fear, with irritation, with anger. The message that the Buddha is saying is that you just take them seriously because those tempers, they can take away your ability to enjoy life, to enjoy peace, to enjoy what you have. And you have the ability, and here is the way, you have the ability to actually do something about them. You can reduce them, you can overcome them totally, should you make sufficient effort. So this is an encouragement, it's a positive message from the Buddha who defines suffering in the widest possible sense, to include even discontent, dissatisfaction, like that. So, in daily life, today is Monday, you get back to work. Just ask yourself, has there been any moment of anxiety? If you have had an anxious moment, this Eightfold Path is for you. The fact that it's for lay people as well, can be can be seen in the fifth factor, which is right livelihood. Because as Buddhist monks, for our requisite food, lodging, even robe, medicine, we depend on the generosity of the people. We can't say, okay, I would only go for this, I don't want this. We live a life which is totally connected with the life of the people, with with the economic reality, with the anxiety. If they are anxious and not doing well in their life, that affects us as well. So our life is connected to that life. We need to, as Buddhist monks, we need to remind ourselves all the time. That is to say that we don't have a kind of a profession that earns us money. We work, but we don't earn. So when the Buddha talks about livelihood, he talks about trade, he talks about professions, and to get them right. So this is something we can say that the Buddha intends this Eightfold Path as much. For Lipu as much that he does for the renunciates. The Eightfold Factor, okay, before I talk about individual factors, briefly, I'd like to mention another one, which is known to many people. These 8 factors part. This 8 factors part is also called the middle part. The middle part. This is to say that there are extremes. And so we got to face those extremes. From time to time, emotionally we become, we either go to the right or to the left. We go to the right by justifying whatever we feel, or we go to the left by blaming ourselves. Yeah. In either case, it's about personalizing. So, to walk the middle path, what we need to be on the lookout is one of the two extremes. There are many books talking about this. One of them I'd like to recommend you is this book, Early Buddhist Teachings. Okay, the middle position in theory and practice. This is by Professor Wan Karunadasa, who is in his 80s and from Sri Lanka. He is one of my teachers. This book was published in Hong Kong in 2013, because at that time he was, I think, teaching at Hong Kong University. So, how this Eightfold Path is centered on the middle and avoids two extremes. He explains very well if you want to know the philosophical implication of the middle path. This book is easily available. According to the first sermon of the Buddha, the two extremes are self-indulgence and self-torture. They have ideologies behind them, which I won't go into detail. But this book, gives you concise and clear explanation on how this Eightfold Path is the middle teaching. But briefly, just for your reference, the two extreme ideologies that are opposed to each other during the Buddha's time, one is spiritual eternalism. They believe in creator Brahma, and they believe that soul will last eternally. So in order to do that, they need to do something to liberate that soul. So that's spiritual eternalism. On the other hand, there was at least one school of thought that was directly opposed to this eternalism. And they are called materialism. So long before communism arose in Europe, materialism, at least the ideology, was there in India in the 6th century BC. So the Buddhist point, the Buddha's view is that those two, they are opposed, diametrically opposed to each other. They negate each other. As a result, they are two extremes. The reason they are called two extremes, not only that they oppose each other, but because the Buddha believed they don't bring relief and liberation from suffering here and now. But as I mentioned in the earlier talk, the Buddha insisted. He was very insistent that we verify through personal experience, whatever he says. So whether the Eightfold Path is really the middle one, how do we judge? The way to judge is whether it reduces a problem. It's about problem solving. The Buddha puts forward this Eightfold Path as a problem solving mechanism. Unless it does that work, okay, no matter whatever we call that, it's no use. So, if we say the Eightfold Path is the foundation of moral practice, the foundation of all moral practices that we have in the Buddhist tradition, the first factor, the first of the 8 factors, actually gives us the theoretical foundation of the moral life. The theoretical foundation, which I like to start now, about the 8 factors. That right view, the first factor, what does it mean? It means 2 things. If we want to combine both of them, it means cause and effect. To believe and also to try to see cause and effect, the process of cause and effect. If we can see the cause of the process of cause and effect in everything, when we get upset, when we are happy, when we do well, when we are not doing well. If we can look at things purely as process of cause and effect, to the extent that we see only cause and effect and it's impersonal. If a particular form of cause and effect, say negative one, happens with anyone, with any government, any company, any citizen, any decision maker, then that decision will bring negative consequences. So it's not who makes the decision, is the form of cause and effect, whether it's positive or negative at that time. And then this causality can be expanded into 2. One is the belief in the efficacy of our action. That is, whatever we do, have the potential to bring results, good or bad. I use the word potential because it's not definite. If we say it's definite, it will be determinism. Buddhism, this middle path is walking in the middle, meaning avoiding determinism on the one hand, and indeterminism, like anything happened by chance, on the other. So, avoiding both of them, this path walks the middle. So, the first one, what I'm saying, the efficacy of our action is karma, the theory of karma. Good action, bad action. There is good and bad. And there are results that follow them. I'll be talking about this in the next, in one of the next lectures. The second one is to look at things within the framework of the Four Truths, the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is what? Is looking at the human condition in terms of cause and effect again. The first Noble Truth is the effect, the second one is the cause. We observe the effect, the manifestation, and then we diagnose the causes. The preposition, the fundamental standpoint of the Four Noble Truth is to study and observe dukkha or suffering within us, outside us. To the extent that we come to understand it sufficiently that not only that we know how to live with that, to accept that, but also how to reduce that. So it's suffering-based approach or problem-based approach. And then to believe, as I mentioned in my first talk, in human effort. This is the right view, that we can do something about problems. You can talk about the COVID-19, you can talk about other pandemics, Ebola, SARS and MERS, or swine flu, whatever, that we have gone through in the last 2 decades. Whenever we face them, we need to look around, inside us and outside us. And then believe in human effort, that we can do something about this. Not to be resigned passively to what is happening. So this is the attitude of the Four Noble Truths, which is here defined as right view. Having this right view will help us to develop, is associate the nearest factor, which is the second one. Sometimes it's called right intention, sometimes right thinking. A right intention, because once we have the right view, we will have some form of commitment and determination to train our thoughts to follow the path. That is why, in that sense, it's called right intention. Sometimes we also translate this as right thinking. But what do we really mean by right thinking? We need to examine the Buddha's own definition. He gives 3 definitions. A thought will be a right thought. It is based on it is based not on the self-centered desire. Self-centered desire. So If we recognize pain within us and in other people, self-centeredness will become less. When we are hungry, if we think about our neighbors, oh, this time, I'm sure they will feel hungry as well, so they might be busy in their kitchen, preparing, for a meal. That thought is less self-centered. We are facing the problem of hunger every day, more than once. And also the problem of thirst. Okay, we have to drink very often. If we think about this need being common, before you take a sip of water, just think about your body, that this body cannot live without this water. Is like torture. This body will be tortured with water, with the food. The word torture is used in one of the reflections that Buddhist monks have to do before they eat. Without nutrition, without food and drink, this body is torture. So this problem, if you only think about yourself, now you are managing suffering as a self-centered person. There is no connection with the rest of humanity. So to train our mind to be less self-centered is one of the aspects of right thought. Of course, if we see problem or suffering or pain universally as a universal experience, which is right thinking, which is right view, the first factor, then it helps us to reduce our self-centered desire, self-centered thinking. Self-centered behaviors would follow from the third, the fourth, the fifth, okay, the three factors. Now we are talking about training the mind directly. I would say that, okay, the second factor, which is right thought, deals mainly with emotion. Being self-centered is a big problem for emotion management. You can talk about fear, insecure feeling, jealousy. All these, they have a lot to do with self-centeredness. The second definition of right thought, right thinking, is non-ill will or loving kindness. Non-ill will is to put it negatively, to describe it negatively. The positive is to have loving kindness, what we call metta. That is to have good wishes, okay, good wishes, generous wishes towards other people for their welfare and well-being, not only when they're in pain, but also when they're doing well. Because metta or loving kindness focuses on both the pain and joy. Some people, they find it easier to feel affiliated to anyone who suffers. But if that person recovers and is doing really well, they have less connection, emotional connection. Instead, they start seeing that person as a competitor. Just a brief definition of metta practice, or loving kindness practice. The last of the three definitions of the right thought is compassion. The word that the Buddha used is non-violence. Non-violence. But we understand this to be compassion. You can see that right thinking is about pro-social thinking. Less self-centered and benevolent thought, which is metta or loving kindness. The third one, compassion. All the three of them, they enforce each other as a pro-social thinking. I think I have already shown you this book, the Oxford Handbook of Compassion. Published in 2017. Okay, a lot of research articles in this, more than 30 of them. Some by medics, by neurologists, by psychologists, by business management people, by educationists, from every aspect. They all agree that compassion, the feeling of compassion, the emotion, positive emotion of compassion, helps us to be pro-social. Pro-sociality is the word they use. And people who think pro-socially, which is the opposite of anti-social, they are healthier, emotionally and also physically, also their brain, everything is healthier. Yes, this is the latest research, which is the ongoing at many top universities and also many Buddhist centers around the world teach this compassion. The reason I emphasize this is for people who are interested in compassion practice, where do we find compassion in the Eightfold Path? It's not mentioned directly, one would argue. But I would say, when the Buddha says right thought, he means compassionate thought. People who have compassion are less self-centered. And they are very keen on the welfare and well-being of other people. So those three definitions we can sum up in one word, which is compassion. Compassion is about feeling the pain as it is, the pain within us, the pain in other people. So we need to have self-compassion as well. You can see that right thought, right thinking, whatever we want to call this, right intention, this is based on our understanding of suffering, our proper understanding of suffering, which is the first factor, right view. They are linked together. to use big words. Right view is directly about wisdom development. Right thought is obviously the development of compassion. And these two, traditionally, we call them wisdom factor. So in Theravada Buddhism, we consider compassion to be part of wisdom. Put it another way, wisdom is not complete without compassion. So these first two factors, they are, as I mentioned earlier, wisdom factors. Some people call them intellectual development, but the word intellectual may be somewhat limited in its coverage. So the word we use in Pali Panya is direct knowing, comprehensive knowing. Knowing in a sense that this knowing has an impact of solving problem. It doesn't mean any knowing. Okay, we know about information, a lot of information that we receive on daily basis from television, from radio. I listen to more radios in the UK when I'm in the UK, but not so much in Myanmar. I can't remember. Okay, over many years listening to radio here. Listening to radio now this day, connecting to social media. We have all sorts of information, and each information gives us an impression that we know something, that our knowledge is increasing. But right view is not about any knowledge, it's about the knowledge that has an impact in solving problem. Otherwise, that knowledge sometimes is a burden. I think maybe I'm not going through all the 8 factors, but I'm going to comment on them, maybe as a group. The next 3 factors, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, these 3, they are about a daily professional life. Living in this society, we can't live alone. We have to communicate with other people. For our security, we have to rely on other people. Rely on other people means, okay, we live where there are many people because we feel safer. To be out there alone, in the desert or in the forest, people don't usually feel safe. So we need each other in this society. We've been many in the animal kingdom. They live in a pride, like lions in a herd, like other animals. The buffalo and all that. But as a human being, to be in harmony, to live in harmony with the rest in the society, we need to maintain the factor of trust, mutual trust between people. That mutual trust can be easily broken when we don't preserve right speech. When we slander, when we tell a lie, when we gossip, when we say something very harsh, actually it breaks someone's heart easily. It breaks friendship as well. It breaks the communication also. So good communication relies not only on the way we understand human problem properly and the positive emotional training, but also on right communication. When I say right communication, I'm talking about right speech. Then right action, all based on non-violence and less self-centeredness. And these two, they can, right speech and right action, you can say, we can say the 5 precepts are part of these two, or these two become 5 precepts. Right livelihood is the livelihood that doesn't harm oneself and other people. So this is again based on non-violence of the right thought. This is also based on that everyone is faced with the problem of dissatisfaction or suffering, physical or psychological, which is the first factor of the path. So you can see that they are linked together. If we focus on pain, on compassion, as widely as possible, as defined by the Buddha, psychological pain that we face on daily basis, anxiety, stress, and the inevitable pain such as getting old, getting sick, or the potential of getting sick, and finally death. So if we reflect on these facts of life as part of mind training, compassion will become, the emotion that we use as a default position. Okay, no more anger or less anger, less agitation, less impatience, but more compassion, more tolerance. Because we use pain or suffering in life as our focus and use it very skillfully to, in a way that it uplifts our emotion. One transformative evidence in the Buddhist practice is that to focus on pain, but not feeling negative, not feeling down, not feeling stressful. We focus on problem of daily life, problem of human life, but our spirit still remains high. That's the transformative effect that we can see. The last 3 factors, right effort, right mindfulness and right concentration. For people who have done some meditation retreat, these three factors are quite familiar. But this day, the word mindfulness, number 7, is everywhere. In one of the conferences in Budapest, in Hungary, on mindfulness, I attended. Somebody actually presented a paper accusing, people like us who promote mindfulness as mindfulness. Mac, like McDonald's, is everywhere. It's like commercializing everything. So is mindfulness part of that? That movement is mindfulness. Is funny to see that presentation. This is to say that mindfulness is in every country now. It's about training our attention and to use the attention to know ourselves better, self-awareness. So sometimes we call this right awareness. And not only, be mindful of our own feeling and emotion, problem, thinking, but also other people's thought, other people's behavior, other people's emotion, their pain and joy. And we can call that social awareness. So self-awareness and social awareness together becomes right mindfulness. Right mindfulness is linked to right effort. Right effort is not just about working hard. It's about knowing weakness and strength. What's the weakness in our emotional pattern? What's the strength? In our thought process, what's the strength? What's the weakness? So to know them and to apply some remedy accordingly, this is right mindfulness. You can see, it's more than diligence. Right effort is more than diligence. It's about intelligent effort. But the effort which is based on understanding, meaning is based on the first two factors in terms of understanding. In terms of practice, it's about the middle three: right speech, right action, right livelihood. It's about seeing our weaknesses, our shortcomings in those speech related matters, in our actions, in our livelihood, and then make some amend. If we already have some positive points, then it's about preserving them, maintaining them. It's about increasing them. That's the right effort. Right concentration is to train the mind to be able to focus on a chosen object, such as breathing, if we do meditation. And if we're at work, our mind is focused on what we're doing. A few years ago, clinical psychologists and neurologists at Wisconsin and other universities in America, they did some research about the emotional life of the brain. They study the brain and also the emotion. Especially, they text people who are at work, asking them, Are you happy now with your work? What's your emotion? Are you happy or not happy? So much, too much stress or what? So one is emotion. The other is whether your mind is at what you're doing. Another one is whether you feel lonely at that time. 47% of people reply, this is thousands of samples, okay? 47% of the people reply that their mind wanders. And when their mind wanders, they are not happy. So there's a paper, scientific paper with the title, "A wandering mind is an unhappy mind." A very Buddhist in terms of wording and formulation. You can say, they take one page, from from any of the books from my library, all Buddhist books. So to conclude that 8 factors, they have to work together. They are not a ladder, and all together they form one word, one path. So even when we speak, if we hurt someone, we need to think about our intention, our emotion at that time, which is the second factor. We also need to think about how much awareness, the level of our awareness of suffering, the suffering that that our speech might potentially cause. That's the first factor, which is right view. And at that time, whether our mind is all over the places, or whether it's concentrated, or whether we personalize a certain issue, or we see it as universal, affecting many people, not just us. So the Eightfold part, or the Eightfold factors, are the factors that we have to apply together when we are faced with problems. Thank you. Any question?
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question here, which is, what is the proper Buddhist attitude towards politics?
What is the proper Buddhist attitude towards?
Politics.
Politics. Oh. I will just recommend you one book. It's available in bookshop like in Blackwell and in other places. It's called Mindful Politics. But I'm going to give you my opinion. Usually, people who feel apathy towards politics, they look at politics as totally negative. Because when they look at politicians, it's about debate of ideas and different ways of doing things. And when you belong to different parties, it's almost your obligation to be different. That is why, people can feel put off by politics. But politics is part of life. If we switch off from politics, we will never be able to influence that. The Buddhists, I think, focus would be problem, would be suffering, would be pain, suffering of the people. So a good politics is about caring people's pain, people's problem deeply. Going beyond ideologies, going beyond party identity, That would be a good politics. But the word politics in English also means division. So when people express, "Oh, it's all politics," then they mean something. What I'm saying here is politics as a form of public service. So if we understand it that way, then anyone who is interested in politics need to be inspired or needs to be motivated by the people's problem and wishing to contribute to reducing those problems or solving those problems. And if one enters into politics, I think that person is not going to be rigid in the lines of party politics. But these days, say for example in Europe, in parliament you have a party whip. If you have compassion and if you think the other party is right, but sometimes you can't vote with them, you can't support them because you are bound and obliged by your party whip to toe the line. So these are the behavior of politicians. But I want people to actually separate politicians' behavior from the ideal, politics, which we cannot avoid, or the need for politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. I have someone who asks, what differentiates empathy, sympathy, and compassion?
Okay. I'm going to quote just scientists who study mindfulness and praying. Okay, like the book I have already shown you earlier. Okay, first is sympathy, then empathy, and then compassion. They go up in that order. Sympathy is understanding. When I understand that somebody is in pain, I don't go and disturb that person. Maybe just understanding, this is sympathy. But if I feel that person's pain, I share with that person's pain. Meaning, I have some feeling. That's empathy. So, sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is understanding, empathy is feeling. Then compassion goes one step further, which is thinking about how to help that person to overcome that pain. So compassion is about practical thinking, at least thinking, and perhaps also action towards reducing that pain. So we empathize with someone. That's empathy. Okay, we try to be in that person's shoe. And then if we start sharing the options how to solve that problem, that becomes compassion. I think it's clear. The Buddhist text, they say the same thing. More questions?
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question here which asks, is knowing non-self the right view, and how should we practice to have right view? Thank you.
I have spoken about non-self today without using the word. I use the word less self-centered or no self-centeredness, something like that. Or no personalization. That's non-self in psychological terms. If I'm angry, if at that moment it's very tempting for me to think that I'm the only one suffering from anger and a lot of injustice, and I don't actually get what I want, what I expected, what I deserve. Other people seem to be okay with that life. So that kind of thought, negative thought, comes in from time to time. That leads to loneliness. So when we feel lonely, that's because we think in terms of self-centered, in terms of self. I'm not talking about ideology. Okay, whether something lasts forever. I'm talking about psychological implication of non-self. Whenever we get a headache at that moment, it doesn't really come to our mind that headache is quite common to people. That is why paracetamol is easily available everywhere. But that doesn't come to our mind easily. When we get headache, we just feel terrible in our head, and then mothers, are thinking at that moment. What we want to do, and usually do, is to think that headache is quite unique to us. To think that way is to think in terms of self. But to see this headache, this physical pain that we go through at this point in time is actually quite common, and you can talk to anyone, they will understand it straight away. It's just so common. If we have that thought at the moment we have headache, psychologically, we wouldn't have mood swing. So non-self is like that. I already mentioned earlier, when you get hungry and when you're about to prepare your food, and after you have eaten, when you have to clear the sink, the kitchen, the table, if you remember, this is the ritual that every household has to go through, and then going through that ritual wouldn't be a big burden. But sometimes when you have 2 family members, 3 family members, and only one is working in the kitchen, there might come a thought that, why me? Why I have to do this? You might start feeling the burden. So, first is to think about the pain that we cannot live without eating, without food, all the family members. So just to feel that pain, to recognize that pain, recognizing dukkha or suffering. That's right view. If we think, every family members and also our neighbors, even people on television, on Facebook, everyone, we have to go through this. They just don't eat in front of you. They just don't cook in front of you. And if we are connected with pain properly like that, then compassion arises. With compassion, when we think in a more pro-social way, non-self is working already. There is non-self attitude, there is non-self behavior already. I hope this helps.
Thank you, Bhante. Should we do one more question, or?
Yes, please, one more is okay.
Okay. Do you have any advice for those who feel lonely and scared to be alone? Thank you.
I do. Trying to read and think about people who are lonely whenever you feel lonely. If you like novel, read novels. If you like psychology, read psychology reports. If read about people who are depressed, okay, how loneliness is part of it. The more you read about those people, the more you think there are many people out there sharing your pain. The moment that thought comes in, you won't feel lonely anymore. And another thing, another practical advice is that trying to observe boredom. We feel bored doing the same thing. We feel bored being in the same place, being at home. Because doing the same thing, when we feel bored, we don't see a sense of purpose anymore in doing that. Actually, during the lockdown, during the restricted time, socially, we can turn this into an opportunity and do something beneficial. Okay. But if we are habitually, just looking for excitement all the time, I don't want to use the word addiction, it may be too strong, but maybe that's the word. If we're addicted to excitement, then we get bored easily. With boredom, loneliness comes. That's one thing. What I said earlier was, to try to connect with our fellow humanity. If we feel bored, trying to connect with people who feel bored. Who couldn't wait, to go to the beaches. Despite all the warning, all the dangers, if you feel that pain, the pain of boredom, the pain of wanting to have some excitement, and then you won't be rushing to the beach. You can stay at home and feeling at least empathy towards them. If you can't do anything, at least you will feel empathy. In many neurological research papers, findings, they say if we stay only at the empathy level, we are still prone to stress. We need to go to compassion, move to compassion, actively thinking about what should be done. Whether or not we actually go out there and do something for the people depends on other conditions. But in our mind, we should be thinking about their pain and if there's anything that we can do. That compassion will remove your loneliness totally. you won't feel alone anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
I think we have run out of time for today. Thank you everyone for being with me.